My dreams come true.
Welcome into another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlon. I'm joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. And Jack, we're just going to spend the next hour and a half absolutely roasting the students.
As we should.
I think so.
As we should.
But no, we got an exciting one tonight.
Yeah, I think this is our weakest intro for one of our most exciting podcasts I think we've had in a long time. I mean, JMU Twitter has been set ablaze with takes from every corner of the universe. We got into some Twitter spats both on JMU Sports News Twitter, on our personal Twitters. Bennett is currently looking for the cockroach that he killed 2 episodes ago. But it's going to be a fantastic episode breaking down. I mean, I think the fan aspect of it has been played out to death on Twitter. That doesn't mean we're not going to talk about it, because I think it's definitely a lot of content for us to discuss. But a majority of this podcast, I hope, is more so what the on-the-field product was against Marshall and the coaching blunders that it seemed to have just snowballed over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, we had a specific request from Peter Mooney to talk about football. So we will fulfill that. But we got to talk about 3 Notch first, right? Every Monday, Minuteman Mondays.
Yep.
$3 Minuteman Pints. We got Wednesday, game nights. I'm getting a hang of what they do there every week doing these. $5 flagship pint. We love 3 Notch. We will be there in under a month now. Make a little visit. So I'm very excited for that.
Not sure if we'll do like a live recording of the podcast or something there, but definitely go to 3 Notch, check out the Valley Collab House. It's going to be a great time. We'll get ourselves some Minuteman. It won't be on a Monday, but a Minuteman Friday when we get in will definitely be necessary. And also Bet Online. Basketball is back, folks, and Bet Online remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at Bet Online. And as your continued source for all sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and always the easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports and events, whether you're an NFL bettor, a basketball bettor, an NHL bettor, MLB World Series bettor, MMA, tennis, boxing, even golf. Head to betonline.ag, that's betonline.ag, to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code BLEAV. It's scrolling along the bottom if you're watching. but I spelled it out for you if you're listening to receive your rewards. Rewards. There we go. Bet online, where the game starts.
James Robinson is a New York Jet, Jack.
Did he just get traded from the Jaguars?
He did.
Are you watching TV as we're recording?
Yes. But I got a text that said that anyway.
That's big. Breece Hall just tore his ACL.
It is big, and it's very big for people who have both Travis Etienne and James Robinson on one of their fantasy teams. Now potentially giving them 2 starting running backs moving forward.
I hate you. You know what happened to my fantasy team before we get into this?
This no way to captivate an audience by talking. No better way than by talking about your own fantasy football team.
Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down with a concussion within the first quarter of that game. He's my wide receiver
really
1.
Technically concussed.
Okay, that's my wide receiver 1, so that ruins my day. DK Metcalf fears that they tore his patellar tendon in the second or third quarter, and he only had 2 points when he went out. And so my flex and wide receiver 1 combined for 4 points when they're normally combining for like 35, 40. Okay, that's it for football, for fantasy football. Sorry about that.
That's it for football. That'd be sweet if that.
And basketball preview.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Marshall loss. So they've lost 2 games in a row for the first time in 7 years, which is kind of a insane stat. So it's been a long time since they've lost 2 in a row.
Also, not to throw any shade at Vadley, because we'll talk about Madison and the great job he did. I guess we'll talk about him. He did a great job in the booth. But man, awesome. whenever he comes around the program, it just seems like 2 losses in a row just seem to follow.
I know what's going on with that, but he was really good. He was really good. He's definitely got to brush up, like I think like most people do, of like getting really crisp with like names on the field and things like that. Yeah. But like in terms of analysis and stuff, I mean I would say the ceiling is very high, and I hope that he does more games.
Oh, he's going to be doing Coastal, but.
That's good.
He did awesome way of breaking down what cover 2 meant, the 4 safeties. When they're rocking and rolling, he used that a few times, shading to one side of the field. I mean, really, the part was that he broke it down, and maybe it wasn't understandable to like the regular fan, because I don't consider us as like regular fans. We watch in way too much football and football analysis as for like the normal person. But it seemed like if you were just a casual fan who doesn't like really understand what cover 2 and cover 4, cover 3, what all of that means, he broke it down in a way that you understood it.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it. I thought he did a good job of making it understandable and also quick. Sometimes color commentators go on like 45-second tangents about like a coverage, and it's like, you lost me. But he was pretty quick. So I thought that was awesome. It was certainly one of the positives. Other than that, it was kind of hard to find some positives. So I guess we should start before kickoff, like moments before kickoff, when everyone kind of learned that Todd Centeio was not going to play, which I thought came as a very large surprise.
Probably the largest shock of this college football season for JMU fans was learning that Todd Centeio wasn't going. Not only that he wasn't going, that there was no news of an injury throughout the entire week. Like there wasn't. All we've known is that he hurt his shoulder against App State, but he's played in every game since then. I don't think he ever missed. Maybe he missed 1 or 2 snaps during one of the games when he kind of got hit
during
there.
The Texas State game briefly.
Okay, so but other than that, like not much happening. Even after the Texas State game, there wasn't much of a breakdown after that, and we haven't heard necessarily anything that led us to believe that Todd Centeio wasn't going to play. And then literally, 10 minutes before kickoff, it's noted that he's not dressed?
Yeah, super weird. So I guess Cignetti described it as a freak injury where his throwing shoulder, I guess, is still sore or whatever. So he would rotate more to make it easier on his shoulder. Like he just like twist his body to get a little extra pop where his shoulder wouldn't have to do it. And in the process of doing that, I guess on Thursday, he like strained his oblique. And it sounds like Thursday night, Cignetti said he thought he was going to play. Friday morning, he realized he probably wasn't going to play. So then they had about whatever that is, a day or whatever to prep for Billy Atkins coming in as the starting quarterback. So obviously a pretty massive shift when you're losing someone who's like the Sun Belt Player of the Year.
Arguably, I mean, I know
he's up there. It's him and McCall are like the 2.
But he's also like putting up numbers that are some of the best in the nation at
Yeah.
times. Like you have one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. Just go down. That's not something you necessarily know how to prepare for and get ready for. But also it's worth noting, at least in my opinion, a lot of JMU fans are like, well, now it's Billy Atkins for the rest of the way. I mean, Todd Centeo's out for the season. He did warm up before the game. He very well could only miss this game. With a week off now, Signetti doesn't seem too, like, listening to his Zoom conference today with the Sunbelt coaches and listening to his post-game comments, he was a little short with it, but he does say the bye week comes at, quote-unquote, perfect time. We have a lot of guys injured, and a lot of them will be coming back and get rested. So it's worth noting that I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that my man's is out for the rest of the season. I think he tried to go on Saturday. He didn't go. And so Louisville very well could be another game time decision. Or we might know midway through the bye week that he's going.
Signetti says some things injury-wise that don't add up, though. He said after the game that he thought that some of them could have been season-ending. And then he says today that he's really optimistic about the injuries. So I guess there were some improvements overnight.
We'll talk about his press conference comments in a little bit because I think they deserve their entire segment on this podcast because, man, has he changed his tune over the last 2 weeks.
But I don't know what to make of the injury. So obviously if Centeo comes back, it's a big deal. Honestly, man, like the Louisville game is cool. I'd rather just have him for the 3 Sunbelt games. Like if he's not ready to go in that one and you can rest him a little more and get him ready and he can play in the 3 Sunbelt games, I feel like those are kind of the more important in terms of like, hey, maybe you can still finish atop the East. I think beating ODU would be a big deal for like rivalry purposes. They've never done that as a program. Like I think that obviously the Louisville game would have a lot of hype and like beating an ACC team, but I think there's benefit to also just like if he's able to play in the conference games, that'd be nice.
I agree with that, but I also think he's going to want to get on the field as soon as possible because he's playing for draft stock because he's not coming back next year. He does and I don't blame him. I would be doing the same exact thing. He doesn't care about next season. He doesn't care about building that sounds rude. I'm not trying to throw Todd under the bus and like be like, he doesn't care about JMU. No. It's just that he has his own personal desires and wants. And if he misses another game where he thinks he could go, he might not be that happy. I don't want to read too much into body language, but I'm going to read into it just a little bit. He did seem a little upset on the sidelines in street clothes that he wasn't playing. Maybe he thought he could go.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, we'll hopefully he can go the rest of the way. That'd be a big deal because it was an offensive slog without him, right? They lose 26-12. Marshall's defense is awesome. Very much worth noting that. But it was a very challenging offensive performance. They went 0 of 17 on third down and 0 for 2 on fourth down. So 0 for 19 on third and fourth down.
I've never seen that.
Unbelievable.
I've never seen that. I've never seen no conversions. I've never seen that.
No, that's just insane. So it was a really tough performance. And if you're Billy Atkins, it's one of the worst possible spots to like get your first start. Like ESPN has Marshall. It's like the 4th most efficient defense in the country. They're super good. So not an ideal spot for him to get his first career start because he really has not played any meaningful snaps prior to this.
Not only are you also facing one of the top defenses in the nation, you also are missing, I think it was 3 offensive linemen at one point. Starting
the
offensive
line is
linemen.
battered, yeah.
So there's a lot of question marks throughout it. But what sticks out to me the most is the coaching staff. Granted, they only had, let's say, 24 hours to prepare. Let's keep that in the back of our minds. But you're starting Billy Atkins on, let's say, Friday. You don't do anything to the game plan from Friday to Saturday to change it. He dropped back. He passed it 35 times. He had another 7 sacks. So 42 pass attempts were called. He had a couple rushes in there too. Not sure how many of those were called runs or if they were called passes. So let's just, for the benefit of the doubt, call it 42 pass attempts. This isn't shade at Atkins. This is shade at the coaching staff. Your running backs were averaging 4.4 yards per rush. Percy was averaging nearly 5 yards per rush. Why did you drop back 42 times in a game That was one possession against one of the better secondaries in the nation.
I didn't like it. I mean, they're also obviously like an elite run defense. Like their whole defense is good, but they had gotten some stuff going with Percy.
They had a couple big runs with Percy, and
he had a couple too. There was one that was like a 9-yard run that if he like ends up breaking one more tackle, it's like a 60-yard run. Like they were close to popping stuff, and that's kind of what Marshall did, where they gave Laybourne 30 carries and he popped one of them. So he averaged 5 yards a carry because one of them, went 60 yards for a touchdown. Like they just kept feeding him. Their quarterback was 15 of 31 for 160, a touchdown and 2 picks. Like he didn't do anything. Like he didn't play well. Like he was fine, but he didn't do anything like overly impressive. But what they did is they like really stuck to the run game. So they had 44 rushes. Obviously, if you're leading in the fourth quarter, it's a little easier to do that. But 44 rushes to 31 passes, where JMU had a much more even split. And it's not really as even because it was 37 rush, 35 pass, but that includes, the 7 sacks. So it was really more pass. And I understand that they were trailing, and some of those you have to call pass plays. But at the same time,
you're down one possession.
Well, like toward the end, they were down 2, and I think they had a couple and like things like that. But like when you're down 19-12, you can still run the ball. And I don't know. I didn't love the game plan at all. Like I thought it was not great. They started off fine. He hit a couple nice passes actually, and some chunk plays, and then he had Horton was uncovered for like a 17-yard touchdown pass. Like I thought Atkins was kind of maybe more in control than I actually thought he would be in the first quarter. And then it seemed like they kept trying to throw it, and it didn't work out. And I mean, I think you can blame all of it on the fake injury and the momentum, but we'll get to that later. But like the drive chart's pretty alarming, to be honest with you. Like not surprisingly, but they went. I think it was. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like 16 consecutive possessions without scoring.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
It's horrible.
And also, you brought up Billy Atkins in the first quarter. He was pretty good in the first quarter. Granted, he was only 5 for 11, which isn't the best completion percentage you want. But I was going to chalk that up to, maybe he was a little yippy in the pocket. Maybe he was we'll talk about pocket. But he was a little hyped to be in there. A couple of his passes kind of skied on the receiver, but ended up with a touchdown, 121 yards, bailed out a few times from some jump balls that maybe shouldn't have been thrown into triple coverage, and Chris Thornton fought back and got the catch. But overall, 5'11", 121 yards and a touchdown. You're sitting back and you're like, he's on pace for over 400 yards. Like, wow. I love the on-base stat. And then from there, he played 3 more quarters. He passed for 43 yards on 8 of 24 passing, with 4 interceptions and a fumble. That's not all Marshall game planning and fixing what happened in the first quarter.
I don't think it's offensive, and if people disagree with me, that's fine. I don't think it's offensive to say that he didn't play well. I think it's the people who tag him on Twitter and are like, you suck.
Yeah.
Very weird behavior. Like, no need for that. But I also don't think it's offensive to discuss the game and say that Billy Atkins had a poor performance. I think he would probably be the first to admit that 13 for 35 for 164 yards with a touchdown, 4 interceptions, and 7 sacks is not a good game. Like, I don't think he's unaware of that. I don't think the coaches are unaware of that. So, I mean, he didn't play that well.
Yeah, and I think – sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think he can play a lot better, especially with better defenses and, like, as he gets more comfortable and things like that. But at the same time, there were definitely things that didn't go well that I think are cause for concern.
100%. And, yes, I think being critical of the quarterback play isn't bad. I think as a college football player, especially when you're a quarterback, you kind of know this comes with the territory. Yes, you shouldn't at him. You shouldn't give him threats of any kind. I didn't see any threats, but just like on the whole with athletes, you shouldn't be atting them, not like verbally attacking them and calling them a trash human, things of that sort. But I think it is 100% fair to say, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, that while he wasn't the only reason they lost, he contributed to that loss with a pretty heavy hand. and he didn't play well. Like, and that's not bad to say. And as I was saying, like, when you're a quarterback of college football, you're not exempt from criticism because you're a college student. And that might sound harsh, but to me, I just feel like you're on full scholarship. You chose to play quarterback, and you know when win or lose, that's going to fall on you. If he went out there and threw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, we'd be hyping him up 100%, and rightfully so. But now he's on the flip side of it, and you have to know that comes with a little bit of pushback.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone should be mean to him. I'm not like, but I just think it's okay to like discuss how players play, because I don't mean that personally, right? It's just like discussing what happened in the game. So I don't think that's offensive. I think some people did that in a way that was fine. Like, I know I floated it. I think other people floated like, might be time to bring in Barnett. Like, it'd be like maybe they'll bring him in just because, I mean, they went 16 possessions without scoring. It's not like a shot at Atkins. It was just like clearly in that moment, in that day, he was having a really tough time. Barnett apparently has taken like mostly scout team reps, which makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So Signetti said that he didn't feel comfortable putting him in because he thought it wouldn't be fair, which is totally fine. But I also think some of it definitely falls on the coaching,
100%.
right? 100%. I think one of the major concerns for Atkins is he seemed I think he wanted to go through his progressions, right? Because guys weren't getting a ton of separation, but he was kind of waiting on those and not necessarily feeling the rush. So there were times where he was looking downfield and was still taking sacks. So I think people were thinking, okay, like faster passes, like let's throw a screen pass, like do some stuff to change it up. I know at one point they ran some read options and actually started a drive. It was working, and they just continued only running read options. And then it stopped working. It was like Marshall's defense is far too smart to just run like 7 read options in a row.
They also weren't imaginative at all. Like, it was just basic read options that you get in Madden.
Yes, it's like, show me some stuff. Do you have like a Wildcat package? Like, I don't know, like, and that's maybe not helpful, but it's like, do some things that are different. Give him some throws that are comfortable and quick instead of some stuff that took what felt like forever.
Or maybe this is a little too advanced for a quarterback that was on 24 hours notice that he was getting the potential start, because like we said, Todd did try and go before the game. So it was probably a 90 to 10 that Billy thought he was going to start. 90 yes, 10% no. So it wasn't fully sold. So maybe you can't necessarily go out and throw the RPO stuff, where that has been a huge key to this offense's success all year. But people on Twitter were bringing up throughout the game of just like, where are the bubble screens? Where are the quick hitters? Where are the slants? Things that were working for the entirety of the season up until last week against Georgia Southern, where it seems like this playbook has regressed back to the days of Donnie Kirkpatrick's secret playbook.
It was, I don't know, it was frustrating because they didn't seem to give him anything like easy. And it was like clearly not working, and it felt like they weren't really adjusting in a way that would have been kind of nice. So, I mean, I don't think he played well, but I don't know that he was necessarily throughout the game put in the best spot to play well.
There were a couple times where his lack of pocket awareness really, really hurt him and hurt the drives.
And I think that's one that too, you obviously want to like coach him up on in the off week, especially if he has a chance to play again for the team's success, but more so like he could legitimately get hurt. Like if he's out there and not aware and like taking a hit, that's going to be tough. But it's also, I mean, he really hasn't played a meaningful snap since high school. I know he's been there a little bit and gotten some reps in. It's just like to go from high school to that Marshall defense would suck. So, I mean, that was tough, and he played well early, and he's done some nice things before. But it was hard. The other thing that I do want to say is that I know fans were kind of critical of their performance and maybe surprised by that performance, and maybe in hindsight they shouldn't have been. I will say, in the defense of the fans, they've kind of been spoon-fed the storyline that Atkins and Barnett are like studs, which they might be, but like all off season, we heard about how it was a quarterback battle, which was, I think, Signetti essentially lying so that he could have like a competitive advantage of not saying whose quarterback was, even though if Middle Tennessee, if he didn't know it was Todd Centeio, what are you doing? But like, I don't know. I think that's probably why he did that, but we were told that it was kind of tight all off season.
Yeah.
And there
was a 3-man race up until like 2 weeks before the season started, I swear.
Yeah, like there were people saying that it was really competitive, and Atkins like won the backup job last year. I think like during the season he like overtook whoever was, I forget exactly how it worked, but I think
Who was
he
the
like
backup last year?
I think he worked himself into, oh, it was him, but I can't remember who. Maybe Patrick Bentley was above him, and then he worked his way over him or something like that. It was something like that where he worked his way
Sure.
to
Okay.
be the backup. But anyway, that like we've been told that he's really good and that Barnett's a stud. And like if you hear that all off season and then they come in and you essentially need like a base level performance with limited turnovers and a few third down conversions, you could probably grind out a win over Marshall. It's going to be frustrating for the fans when like nothing works. And there's going to be some shock for the fans when it's like, wait a second, like you told me 2 weeks ago this guy was like really good.
It's also insane to me, and I don't mean to be beating a dead horse when I say this, that they dropped back 42 times. You have for all intents and purposes, a freshman quarterback in there seeing his first ever game action. And you're saying you're going to drop back 47 times against one of the best defenses in the nation when you have one of the best rushing attacks in the Sun Belt. And in this game, they're averaging 4.4 yards per rush. Percy's averaging 4.8 yards per rush. They're not really getting into the backfield all that often for negative plays. So most of your rushes are positive. Like, I just don't get that part of it. Like, why? What changed? This is a team that scored 40-plus points in 4 of the first 5 games this season. It scored 38 points against Georgia Southern in a loss. Granted, there were some issues last week with Georgia Southern, but what's happened with this offense? And maybe it's 1 week, maybe it's recency bias, maybe it's kind of both last week and this week put together, but it just seems like this offense hit neutral and tried to coast for a little bit, and it's not like this isn't the FCS. The coaching staff can't be putting it in neutral.
It was weird. And then the other, so I know some people compared it to like Vad getting hurt and Shore coming in, but it felt a little bit to me more like when Shore got hurt in the championship season against Villanova, he like broke his collarbone and Cole Johnson came in. So I pulled up the stats because Villanova had one of the best defenses in the conference that year. Cole Johnson comes in, they end up winning the game 20-7. Johnson was 5 for 12 for 43 yards and 2 picks. Like he was not good.
But that's also how you should handle a quarterback who hasn't gotten a lot of action.
Khalid Abdullah had 33 carries.
Yeah, that's 100% how you should handle this. There's no reason why Percy only had 20. Also, what happened to Kaylon Black? I was told he was back.
He must still be on a pitch count, man. Because when he had 3 catches for 20 yards and looked extremely explosive, if he wasn't on a pitch count, that was like egregious game management because he was clearly.
But also, like, why don't we know this?
Yeah, there's a lack of like general injury news that's released that's like phenomenally frustrating from a fan standpoint. So that's another thing. But I'll also say for the Billy Atkins camp, like Cole Johnson struggled a lot like throughout the parts of his career and then went off and had one of the best seasons like in program history. I'm not saying Billy Atkins is going to do that, but I know there are also some people who are like, yeah, Billy Atkins is not it. And it's like, well, let's see a little more before. Like, I still think they're bringing in a transfer in the offseason, and maybe it doesn't work out. But I think it's way premature to say, like, he's not going to be good when his first career start came against the best defense in the conference. That's all right.
That's fair.
I'm not saying that it was like a great performance because it wasn't, but I think that some people are prematurely being like, the other thing too is like, I don't know that Barnett coming in with even less experience would actually be better. People love like the idea of backup quarterbacks. I think like if Centeio can't go, I think JMU just needs to really run the ball and give their quarterbacks some easy passes to help them, work their way through the season.
I'll also say this, while Billy Atkins' first real game action since high school was terrible, I don't think it's all on him. I think the coaching staff severely failed him by not giving him easy passes, rhythm passes, and by not letting the rushing attack rush for 40-plus attempts. Like I think this is more on coaching than it is on Billy. Billy didn't play well. He has a lack of pocket awareness. He has a lot of things he's going to have to work on. I don't know him as a kid, as a person. I imagine he probably would be the first to tell you that there's a lot of stuff, though, that he needs to work on, just knowing quarterbacks. There's a lot of stuff he has to work on, but it's the coaching staff, I think, that needs to work on some things even bigger. to try and help him if Todd Centeio can't go. If not, that offense works well. That offense probably wins the Marshall game.
The Todd Centeio offense?
If the offense they just ran against Marshall, if you put Todd Centeio in, they win by probably 2 scores.
Yeah, I think they would have won with Centeio, which is another reason kind of why it's I guess why I don't get on the fans too much for being surprised at the struggles, right? Because
I heard that Billy Atkins almost beat him out.
Right, that's
up until the week before kickoff. I was told it was a competition.
And I don't know, like part of me is almost interested to see Atkins play again because I feel like they could give him a significantly better game plan. Like it was frustrating when it was like, okay, he hasn't played in 3 years. Like I think the pocket awareness against a way better pass rush is pretty rusty. Like you got to give the guy quick passes. Like I don't know, it just felt like they had passes where it was like he's going to his third read and you're going to get him murdered because the offensive line is like really banged up, especially by the end of the game.
Yeah. Well, moving on from the offensive side of the ball, I do want to just have a quick shout out to the defense. If you want to talk about them a little bit more, yeah, the final score was 26 points, but for a majority of that game, they were holding Marshall down big time, 19 points. 2 of those points came by way of blocked special teams, blocked extra point, which we'll talk about in Signetti excuses. But this defense is good. They came back after Georgia Southern, and I got to commend them for that. I was really harsh on this secondary. Marshall's offense isn't one that's going to, be prolific in the passing game, but outside of a 60-yard rush, they held their own, and they continued to do what they do, which is stop up the rushing holes, and they gave the offense the opportunities it needed time and time again, and the offense just couldn't come through. That's not on the defense. The defense did everything in their power to win that game, and I just got to shout them out and say they did fantastic.
I think if Centeio played, it was kind of the game script we expected, right? It was like a grinded-out game where JMU still wins by like 2 scores because they have more explosive playmakers. They just didn't happen to have one of the best, most experienced players in the Sun Belt. So, I mean, that's obviously very tough. Like, I think what is Centeio? He's probably like 24. Like, and Atkins is maybe 20. Like, that's a pretty huge difference in terms of like years playing college football and like body development and all this stuff. So it was a tough spot for JMU, but yeah, the defense kept them in the game and they probably could have won. And honestly, man, they also got like legend in the special teams department again. They should have given up a punt return for a touchdown, and Tate Beaver had like a really nice tackle to save it. But they like field position, they were getting crushed. And some of that is they couldn't, they had, it was like 11 3-and-outs or something. But I don't know. Field position was tough, and it's obviously complimentary. But the defense was sort of had its back against the wall, it felt like, the entire game.
Bro, what are these special teams? What's going on with the special teams?
Special teams are not looking great.
Moment of silence for the special teams.
Oh, here's a question. Do you know how many combined?
Way to interrupt my moment of silence.
Do you know how many combined first downs there were?
5.
5. Both teams.
6.
22. 12 to 10. I've never seen that.
Weren't there combined 27 punts?
I think it was 24 or something. Yeah, 24. Each team had 12 punts.
Insanity.
Oh man, that's so bad.
But yeah, defense is good. Shout out them. They were put into a position to fail, and they didn't fail. They came up big time and time again. I'm excited for the future of this defense. Mm-hmm. Man, can they recruit defensive players? Now
they got some guys.
This part of the podcast.
Hell yes.
We talked about it, and the reason I say, man, can they recruit defensive players? Apparently, Signetti hasn't been recruiting offensive depth, and I'm not throwing shade at the offensive depth at all. These are words coming from the Kurt Signetti, the head man. He doesn't think this team has the depth to compete at the FBS level. But just 3 weeks ago, when the Dukes were 5-0, nay, 4-0, going into that game to become 5-0 on national television, depth wasn't a problem. Depth was a strength of this team. This team was rolling through FBS competition, and it was no problem. They were prepared for this. It was no issue. Oh, but now that they've dropped 2 in a row and injuries are starting to come, now depth is an issue. Now this is an excuse we can fall back on. I'm not trying to be rude. Kind of am trying to be rude here. But come on, Kurt. Let's chill with these excuses.
I remember reading in the offseason something about how the COVID year let JMU have extra scholarships that was supposed to help bridge the gap of like depth issues. Not saying that it totally bridged it, but there were like articles in the offseason saying that they were more prepared.
Well, they are because of it. Instead of having like a 24 scholarship different or whatever the difference was, it was like a 5 scholarship. It's insane what COVID did to help them with this transition, which was a big reason I thought they were so successful to start, because they didn't have that gap anymore. But apparently that's an issue now. That wasn't an issue 3 weeks ago.
I think my big gripe with that comment is where he went on and he was like, Marshall has quality depth. This game was extremely winnable. Like, I don't care. I don't know what he saw from Marshall. JMU went 0 for 19 on 3rd and 4th downs.
Can I say a hot take real quick?
Yes.
If they go 1 of 19, they probably win this game.
I mean, if they get a few and they do any, this was an extremely winnable game that they led 12-2. I don't want to hear about the depth thing, because they were in this game and it was like, yeah, we wore down from the depth. It was like, maybe, right? Because some of the offensive linemen were going down, sure. But you're telling me you've got nothing in the bag scheme-wise. You got nothing to get a drive or two going. And find a way to just eke out the win. I hated it. I hated and also maybe that's true. Maybe in your heart you believe that your depth isn't good enough. But can you just one time go to the presser and be like, you know what? I didn't prepare our backup quarterback the way that we should have. And we lost. And we didn't get anything going offensively. Yeah. And my 40-year coaching background is in offense. And that's on me. Even if you don't believe it, man, just say it so the fans are pleased one time. It's so weird when his Sunbelt opening statement is 3.5 minutes listing excuses of things.
Also, I think it's weird to have the offensive line as an excuse, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I could very well be wrong on this. To have your offensive line be a major excuse that you're using about why the passing attack is lacking and why why the scheme has changed, but you're still averaging nearly 5 yards a carry. That. The offensive line is a big part that you're averaging 5 yards per carry, right?
For sure. They were holding their own. Some of it, Percy had some monster runs where he was battling through guys. But I thought they were holding up. It was also I don't know, the week before we saw Georgia Southern do a lot of very quick passes and completely neutralize JMU's pass rush. You tell me they don't have anything that's quick passes that could sort of mask the offensive line. I don't know. It just felt I don't know. They just feel like excuses sometimes, where it's kind of convenient, where when things aren't going well, it's we don't have the depth. When a few weeks ago, it sort of felt we're rolling and right. I don't know, if you go on the Jim Rome show, say you want to play in a college football playoff, and then you lose 2 in a row and you look like a team that, isn't going to finish, near the top of the Sun Belt, maybe just cool it on those comments then.
Maybe it's the Jim Rome show curse.
It could
Huff went on it after the Notre Dame win for Marshall, and now all of a sudden they've lost their games. I'm just saying. But another excuse that I think we have to come to the defense of the MRDs here for was probably one of the most heinous excuses I've ever heard in my entire life. Apparently the reason that Camden Wise didn't get enough underneath that extra point and it was blocked was because the MRDs were playing. Which is 2 parts of that. Blatantly wrong. Well, actually, there's 3 parts of it. Blatantly wrong. 2, just wait if they're playing. It's not like there was
they
1
snapped
second.
It 17 seconds on the play clock.
Exactly. And then thirdly, if you can't kick a ball when it's loud, you have bigger issues than the band playing.
Well, they didn't block. On the right side, they barely blocked, and he was saying,
"Oh, that's right," because they couldn't hear the snap count.
It's just it's a very strange thing to be well, it's the same thing too, where it's fans were too loud, and then the same people are where are the fans? Fans are too quiet. They're not making the home field advance. What do you want? You want some perfect middle ground where they're kind of loud sometimes, and it's just infuriating, and it was super weird, and then it became a weird thing that did not need to be where
It blew up quickly on Twitter.
He was then clarifying with like multiple heart emojis that he loves the band. It was like, you could have just said that they didn't block on the right side, or that like they made a mistake and that's something we got to clean up in coaching. I don't know.
Or just like, if you want to blame someone, blame the fans, like the fans.
Well, even that's ridiculous.
Well, it's ridiculous, but like, why are you singling out the only student group that comes to every single game and stays for the entirety of the game? And like, their job is the pep band on Sat. Like, as a former MRD, I was only in it for 1 year, so my allegiance isn't that strong. But man, did that comment offend me? How are you going to go out there and call out the only people that are there for you through every single game, through the thick and the thin of it all? And then even if he does throw the fans under the bus, you're expecting them now to come to the games? Like, Cignetti has said nothing really positive of the fans his entire coaching tenure. And then his first thing about the fans is, they're too loud, man.
Well, the original tweet from Shane said it was the fans, and then he had a follow-up that Cignetti was clarifying that it was the band.
That's
which
right.
is so wrong. Like, it's like, no, it was the band. And then the band was like, no, it wasn't. He was like, well, good to know. Like, what are you talking about? Just don't say anything. It's so I don't know. It just seems so unnecessary. And then he also, do we go to the fake injury comment?
Yeah, I'll take off this lower third. We'll go back to excuses. No more in defensive. MRDs, I just want to shout out the MRDs. Thank you for all you do. You guys are fun. I remember the New Hampshire playoff game in 2018, something like that. It was Thanksgiving week. There's 12,000 fans in the stands, and the marching band was so loud, not by playing, but by cheering, that the refs had to stop the game and tell them to be quiet. And I've honestly never heard Bridgeforth louder than 12,000 fans defending the MRDs. And I kind of hope that that's what the fans do next home game when JMU has the ball.
It was just very weird. But no, so he's going on this thing talking about why they lost to Marshall, which is essentially just a list of excuses. I don't know if he had a notepad or something, but the one is like, this was also circulating on Twitter, and the player did fake the injury.
Oh, it was
very clear in the moment.
Fantastic. It was amazing.
So they've got JMU had a 2nd and 16, and they ran for 15 yards. They have a 3rd and 1, like near midfield. They're running up. Marshall has 12 guys in the field, and a defensive lineman just collapses. And they go over like he's injured, and they show the replay. He's standing perfectly fine, sees this 12th man like sprinting his little butt to the sideline and just falls over. So like clearly faking it. And Cignetti mentioned it, which I thought was funny on the little Sunbelt thing. But then he goes like, that it was, what was the score at that point? It was 12-2.
I think it was 12-2 at that point, and they were driving to potentially go up a third score. And
he has the audacity to say, that kills momentum because, we could have scored a touchdown. Instead, we don't go up 3 scores. They get the ball back. We give up a 60-yard touchdown. It's a 1-score game. How is that all related to the guy falling down? That's not what happened. Like, you gave up a 60-yard rushing touchdown on 3rd and 6. You didn't get the 3rd and 1 because you got stuffed on the run, and you punted. When I think
also probably shouldn't have punted.
Remember, he considered going for it. He was like, "Oh, I might go for it." Steady punts it, and then 3 plays later, they're in the end zone. Also, JMU's only touchdown drive of the game was a 17-yard touchdown drive.
Yeah,
you're at midfield. In a field goal, it would still be 2 possessions. In what world were you almost going up 3 possessions? Like, in what world was that offense about to just motor it down, score a touchdown, when they did nothing for the entire game? Like, it's an insane take to be like, we are so close to scoring a touchdown. We're up 3 scores. It's like, what?
Yeah. I mean, this podcast has involved a lot of long pauses after one of us makes a point because I think we wholeheartedly agree with everything each other is saying. I will say this. I have to give it to Marshall. I have to hand it to him. That's a fantastic play. I'm not going to get mad about it because if JMU did the same thing, I'd be cheering for it on my couch. I'd be so hyped. So I can't sit here and be double and 2 standard on it and be like, how dare they do that? I hope my team has that type of awareness to make that type of play. Saved him 5 yards, saved him a 3rd down conversion. And what do you know? JMU can't convert a 3rd down when it's 3rd and 1, and then don't go for it on 4th. Come on.
if you're not going to penalize him, right, it's like the savvy thing to do. And I know people are going to get mad and be like, you can't do that. But like he can within the rules based on how they're sort of set. Because it's hard to be like, you're definitely faking an injury, even though he was definitely faking an injury. But I don't know. It was just kind of a weird one where I don't think the logic made sense where it was like we were going to go up 3 scores instead it was 1. It was like, well, you controlled the ability to like still pick up the first down and stop the run on third and like it's not totally fair to say that it was from 3 scores to 1 score. It wasn't like you fumbled at the 1 when you were like celebrating and somebody accidentally dropped the ball and they returned it all the way back or something. It was like a pretty clear, they just made a string of plays that were better than your team's. And I don't know.
The other excuse that got me riled up, I think the most out of all of them, outside the MRD one, he said, Marshall's only played 1 game in the last 20 days. Yeah, that's how bye weeks work in this part of the schedule. Like, I don't get why he's using that as an, like, is he mad at the schedule makers at the Sun Belt? Like, what's that excuse?
So they played, so between like October 1st and October 22nd, Marshall had played 1 game and JMU had played 2 games. Oh, all right.
It was so weird.
I don't know. Okay. Like, if you're going to lose every time that happens, man, that sucks.
You think Louisville's going to say that? JMU's coming in off of a bye week, their second bye week of the season.
What are we supposed to Satterfield in his press conference? You can't fire me. They had a second bye. What do you want me to do, man?
In the last 2 weeks, they only played 1 game.
I don't know. It was just like a huge string. Like if it's also fine, like if you think all those things, just don't say them.
It's also fine they lost.
Yes, you're 5-2. Everyone's pleased with what's going on for the most part. Like things are happy. One of the losses with your backup quarterback, no one's mad. Just I don't know. Just be like, hey, like
we're just kind of upset. We're just kind of upset at the play calling. Just seems like it's got a little stagnant over the last 2 weeks. It seems like a little bit of questionable decision making when it comes to, having your backup quarterback in and you decide to throw 42 passes and not really give him the opportunities he needs to succeed. I'm mostly just curious about that. I'm not really mad about losing the game. I mean, it's a bummer they lost on homecoming, but all right. I'm just mad about how they lost and the reaction to it after they lost.
I also didn't like the week before when they had the punt blocked against Georgia Southern. He made a comment that was like, we had an upperclassman who just decided not to block. It was like you don't have to say that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just
he's thrown that guy under the bus. He threw Billy under the bus in this game. Like JMU fans are like, we shouldn't be mad at him. Let's talk about the coach who like completely threw Billy under the bus in the post-game press conference. Noah Fleshman asked a question kind of set up Billy in a way. I don't think that was Noah's intent, but just the way the question was a little worded definitely put Kurt in a weird spot, Kurt Signetti in a weird spot. And he took the wrong route down it, and he was just like, well, he's been here for 2.5 years. We expect more out of him. He's been practicing. I don't know what the issue is. Like, and it was just like, oh, maybe don't say that about your potential starter for the next 4 weeks.
I don't know. It felt like there's a lot of excuses. I know Ezra Hack's enjoying this segment, but
I'll be honest. Ezra Hack, if you're listening, shout out to you because, man, your trolling got off a little bit. They were 5-1 there. Things were looking up for the Dukes. All of a sudden, so much new ammunition for you this week. And honestly, the couple of your tweets, I unfortunately agree with.
There is definitely some times where, and again, this is like a fan thing where it's like you kind of just like want him to say that some of it was maybe coaching. I don't know. Some of it felt a little weird with like the Marshall player going down felt like an unnecessary. Like if you think that's a thing, I would send that to the league office and see if they do anything. They wouldn't, but like that's sort of your route to do something there. I don't think it's a press conference. That was a momentum shift.
I'll say this. Last week, the loss didn't feel like it landed solely on the play calling and the coaching. Last week against Georgia Southern, it felt like they have one of the most prolific offenses in the country, and we have one of the worst secondaries. Yeah. And they game planned the heck out of us with Clay Helton, and they neutralized everything we do well on defense. And that felt like more like they were the better coach. They were the better team that day, and it didn't fall squarely on coaching. This game felt like the loss fell solely on coaching. Preparation and coaching.
It felt like there were some things that could have been better that I think would be interesting, even to hear them talk about more in terms of what it looks like trying to scramble to get a game plan. But I also want to give a shout out to my guy Chauncey Logan, first career interception.
Charles?
Heck, I knew you were gonna go there. Heck of a play.
Sorry,
From
who's Chauncey?
yeah.
I know Charles Logan.
heck of a play from him. So that was
Chauncey's
cool.
good. Chauncey's going to turn into a star. Chauncey's a solid CB1.
Nice little bounce back from the secondary. I know it was like a significantly easier opponent, but to have them like make sure that it looked like that still, I thought was nice. So
And
there's,
got
I don't know,
picks.
there's some things there that I like. There's some things that are pretty exciting, but at the same time, I wish they had won the game, and I wish that there was maybe some different comments after the game.
What a segue. I would say I think if they won the game, we wouldn't be having this third segment of the podcast. The reaction. We've had the field. We've had the excuses. It's now for the fan reaction, kind of the reaction afterwards. And us saying this stuff on the podcast probably does nothing to accomplish the issue at hand. The issue at hand, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is an overarching college football issue. The question is, how do you get students to stay at football games for 4 hours on a Saturday? And then when it's at JMU, a Saturday that was beautiful, and I guarantee you there was 15 darties going on, all with kegs flowing with not hour lines to wait for them.
It seemed like a particularly bad game day experience day. Like people
Probably
took
because they
forever
had
to
26,000 people in the stadium.
But that wasn't a surprise.
You're
Like
right.
you knew it was so. I don't know. You got to find a way. I have a hard time if like the experience kind of blows, and I don't know. I don't know. This is a very hard topic for me to get into without like,
getting upset.
getting really mad. But I mean, like fans have left at halftime for a while. They left at halftime in this game. A little surprised by it, but there are some things that immediately come to mind. For example, I watched the game on TV. And holy crap, the first half was slow and boring. Like
The first quarter took an hour.
Yeah. It was really slow. So then they leave the game. And then people got so mad after, man. People got so mad on the internet about the fans leaving. And it's
People were blaming the fans for the loss.
I've yet to see a convincing reason like why a JMU student needs to stay for 4 quarters.
That isn't because it's football. Like there's been convincing is you're right. You covered the base. Sorry.
No, it's just I don't know. It's confusing because then I don't want to dox anybody, but like you've
already done that once this week.
Yes, that's so true. That's something that I've done this week. But it was just. So I'll pull this up. I tweeted it and I said, asking this genuinely, can someone provide a convincing reason why the average JMU student who isn't a diehard fan should stay 3 to 4 quarters? One of the main responses is like, do you buy a ticket and leave a movie or concert before it's over? It's like, well, I mean, the tickets are technically.
Well, Ezra also had a really good point to that. Shout out Ezra. Probably one of the things I agree with. He goes, well, if it's a lousy concert, I would. And it was a lousy game. People kept bringing up the fact, I don't know if you're still pulling up stuff, so I'll keep talking. People kept bringing up the fact that it was a one-possession game, and why should fans leave when it's a one-possession game? I think that kind of completely forgets what was happening in the game itself. That's a really, changing the narrative what the game was. The second Marshall went up, there was no hope JMU was winning that game. There was 30 minutes left in that game. Marshall was up. And I had no hope we were going to win.
It wasn't like, I don't know. It's like, I feel like it should be a case by case basis on like why fans leave because there are different things every time.
Yes. Cause did fans leave the Weber State immaculate kick?
No. And I don't know that they obviously didn't hit 26,000, but like game was cool. The people that were there wanted to be there.
Yes.
And like, I think I would be cool if people stay the entire game. Like I obviously would like that. I think that'd be cool. But people are like, why we got to wonder why App State has diehard fans. It's like, well, they've had their program longer as part of it.
I think that's the other part. We don't have the football culture. And we were texting about this during the game. JMU doesn't have that culture. JMU started their program relatively recently compared to other programs. Heck, we were on Flow Sports 1 year ago. Like, the reason people are such diehard Virginia Tech fans and even UVA fans is because they were born into that family. There were kids who went to JMU when I was there, when you were there. You brought this up last night, that were Tech fans and UVA fans that would drive 4 hours to Blacksburg to watch a Virginia Tech game on a Saturday rather than go to Bridgeforth, 5 minutes of a walk away from them, and watch that game. Like, the issue is that JMU's young, and I understand that, well, we want to expedite that process. Totally fine. I get that. I'm right there with you. I would love to see 26,000 kids, 26,000 alumni, students, fans, everything in that stadium from kickoff to the end of the game. That would be awesome to see. But I don't think that's going to come from demonizing students, blaming them for the loss. We all want the same thing, which is to watch a football game, to have it packed the whole time, and while I'm doing it, maintain my buzz.
It's also, it bothers me when people are like, it can't be for lack of on-field success. Like, you have an incredibly inflated view of what JMU football is if you think that.
Yes. We're not we're new to success.
First 10-win season was in 1994. Then the next one was in 2004, then 2008, then they didn't have another until 2016. And like the last 5 years, they've been awesome. They've also built the fan base up a lot the last 5 years. Like, you have to be patient. People are like expecting overnight that the students are going to care. Like, you have to consistently do things that matter. And the other thing that people were saying was like, you can't just build the tradition like year after year. It hasn't been built. It's like, well, it's way different now that they're in the FBS and they can actually realistically get UVA to come to Bridgeport. Like, that's not an unrealistic thing. UVA is going to Coastal like next year or in 2024. Like, those are things that could happen, and that helps build the culture. Like, they're at a level where they're now going to be talked about on ESPN when they play well and they get in the AP poll. Like, they're going to build more culture now that they're actually at the higher level of college football. The idea that like FCS actually matters is overinflated by JMU fans. It's cool. I loved it, but it's very niche. Like, most people do not give a crap about FCS football. So it's hard to build a culture at a level that, like, I don't know, isn't cared about that much. And they also always led the FCS. They were like always toward the top in attendance in recent years. So it's like they've had a pretty good culture for where they were. It's going to take some time to build it more than that. And also, like, why do you care what a 17-year-old, I'm not 17, what do you do with an 18 to 22-year-old? Why do you really care where they spend their afternoon? Like, just get over it and enjoy the game.
It just seems like it kind of boils down to people want the atmosphere to be lit for themselves, which is a totally reasonable thing to want. Like, when we go to the Georgia State game, I would love to be screaming my head off for 4 hours during 4 quarters, but I also understand that probably isn't going to happen. But I would love that. But I'm not going to go out there and be like, the fans need to stay because the football and try and veil their argument and saying like, well, they work hard. We need to show them respect and watch them play because they bust their butts for the school. No one does that and this is the point you brought up on Twitter. It was just like,
I doxed her.
Yeah, exactly. But no one does that for women's soccer. No one does that for field hockey. No one does that really for, and when I say no one, I mean like a passionate student fan. Like, the volleyball isn't setting attendance records once a season. Like, people aren't going in droves to the Forbes Center to watch the latest theater production. And they all are working the same as much as, if not harder, than the football team for the school.
Why is, like, if you're going to say for to support the athletes, why don't you clamor for everyone to go to baseball games, which are like almost entirely empty, right? Like, that's not the actual argument that anyone's making. The real reason they like it is because they go to football games. They like it when the football game atmosphere is cool. But nobody wants to say that because no, it's school spirit. It's for school spirit. This is the reason I want this is for school spirit. It's like, well, what about all the other events that would also be school spirit? I don't know. It's just weird. I think it's kind of a ridiculous argument and a waste of many people's time. But, that's how we do it. The other thing, I was just going to say that I don't love the blaming of the students because this is the current culture that JMU has. And if you want to point fingers to anyone, what is the athletic department, what is the game day staff doing to make people want to stay?
Exactly.
Other than, like, they had a huge 1 hour line. You barely can get a beer. The beers are all on the opposite side of the student section, so it's like a long trek to even get over there, and then you
And it's
wait
like
in
an
line
hour wait.
forever. Yeah. So, like, fix that.
And it's also, like I said, like there's 15 parties going on during it. Like work with Greek Life, work with student organizations, athletic department to, figure out how to come together and create a game day atmosphere that students want to be at, that Greek Life wants to be at. Because if there's not 15 parties going on and Bridgeforth is the party on Saturday, then you're not going to have all these students leave. But it's also worth noting that JMU isn't a football culture, it's a party culture, which is both are okay. I want to make that known at the start of this point. But JMU is a party culture. You have to get it, and people were like, "Well, why did they claim a ticket if they weren't going to stay for the entire game?" Well, you need a ticket to get into the tailgating, like the student tailgating section. At least you did my senior year. I don't know if they've revised that rule, but my senior year, you needed a valid game day ticket to get into the tailgating. And that's where people care about this. I mean, before you had that rule at Upper Convo, you had thousands of kids there and only 50% were going to the game. The point of a Saturday is to go out and day drink. And I think someone on Twitter said, people really overestimate their day drinking skills. And it's not wrong. You have a 2-hour tailgate and then a 4-hour game. I'm not making it through that. I understand my limits, but when you're 18, 19, you don't understand that. And then not only that, you then can't buy beer when you get in because you're not legal.
Right. It's just, I don't know, like they want to have an enjoyable experience. And the culture is that, like, you go with your friends until halftime. Then maybe if the game's crazy and like we're staying for you, stay. Otherwise, you leave. So people are always like, why would you get a ticket if you can't suck it up and stay 4 quarters? Like, that's a weird logic to have. Like, wouldn't you want to pitch reasons why it's fun for the student to stay instead of being like, what are you, a coward who can't stay 4 quarters, you stupid millennial with your dumb attention span? Like, oh, now I want to stay. Thanks, old man. I don't know. It's all very negative. And I wish JMU had like maybe even a more advanced like reward system, because I know some other schools have that.
And some
I don't
people have
know.
been saying that if like you check out and it's at the end of the game, and the more you do it, you get higher up on priority and all that. And I think that's a fantastic idea. I think there's so many ways that you can adjust the game day experience to make it better. First and foremost, make Wi-Fi available in the stadium.
That would be helpful.
Then reward the 4 quarters. Make the the line to get in not an hour, the line to get beer not an hour, the line for a bathroom not 10, 15 minutes. Like, it's just better to watch the game. And like I said, I don't think this is a JMU problem. This is a college football, if not a football as a whole issue that the NFL is dealing with too, is that attendance numbers are down because it's better to watch a game on TV. Because during those extended periods of no action happening on the field, you're watching 15 different replays of the angle of what just happened. And at home, that's so much better than in stadium. To me, it's just like there needs to be accountability from JMU to fix it, from the athletic department, from marketing, from all of those places to fix this. But at the end of the day, what I'm afraid of is that they sold it out. They see that they're able to post that 26,000 people came graphic, and that's it for them. They're getting the people through the door. What's it matter if they stay?
Right. And it's also, I wish there was a little more like appreciation for the fact they did set like the attendance record. Like, there's still obviously an interest there, and it was pretty cool in the first half with all those people there, and obviously you want them to stay. But I think it's like baby steps, right? The attendance records are pretty darn good start to get there. I know some of the football players were frustrated because they notice when people leave. I get that. But I don't think you should yell at the students. I think the athletic department essentially needs to do something to make them stay.
Also, maybe a hot take. 2 hot takes back to back. I'm going to hit you with them. I think if this was the Georgia Southern game, fans aren't leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, like you said, it's a case-by-case basis. I think each game matters. Weber State, they didn't leave most of the playoff games. They did not leave when we were down in the FCS. Like, when it's a good game, fans don't leave. And fans aren't used to, for cultural reasons, good regular season games. And also, I get Harry O'Kelly and Kelvin Azanama, 2 former JMU players. I asked them, does it really matter that fans leave at halftime? And both of them brought up some solid points. Harry O'Kelly gave a really good answer of just like, when you're walking out of the locker room after halftime and you see the student section empty, it's disheartening because you look there and you see it. That makes total sense. I will put a little bit of the onus then back on the football team. You kind of have to do something to get people involved. Make the students feel like they're part of the team.
That's the other thing. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like, I remember Matt Brady would always make like visits to dorms or classes or whatever.
Yeah.
Not that he's like the star of getting students in stands or anything. Like, there was just
Well, he did live in Charlottesville, so he really rile up the Harrisonburg community.
and then like I think even Rowe would try to do that. I don't know. It's like there's got to be something from the coaches and the players to like, say that you care,
If
right?
they want that, if they want it.
Yeah. I think that's important too. So, and it's the other thing too is I think it's fun when we float ideas and other fans float ideas at the same time. Like, I'm sure there's research and best practices that like the athletic department knows or can get. And like, I feel like it kind of falls on them a lot to like, hey, let's try some things and see if they work. Whether it's, they're doing like a documentary on the football team. Like, the video staff's sweet. I'm sure they could put some videos together of like encouraging people to stay and things like that. I don't know, just like show some creativity, show some stuff that makes people want to stay.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Bennett.
Yeah, well, that's how it goes sometimes.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I probably got to get back to docking people soon. So
we did have a few quick questions I'm going to put.
Oh, yeah.
The Sunbelt pick 'em. I don't think they were necessarily all that in depth. We did have one from Patrick John McGrath at Field of McGrath. Do you guys find the general hysteria over losing 2 games and students leaving early to be hilarious like I do? I'm still a huge fan and sad about the losses, but isn't this all just so funny? They're literally college kids playing a game. I do kind of find the hysteria a little bit. I mean, we were part of the hysteria for what it's worth. Like, we weren't excluded from this. We definitely were part of this fueling the fire.
Oh yeah,
both of us heavily. I think at the end of the day, what fires me up the most about this is we all want the same thing, right? It's just we're like, why are you going about it that way? And they're over talking back at us. Why are you going about it that way? I think at the end of the day, we can all agree the MRDs are the best part of any Saturday, and Kurt Signetti better lay off the Marching Royal Dukes. All right, I got that out of my system.
I'm glad you did. I was worried you wouldn't for a second.
Paul Cottrell, this is a two-parter, so this one will be a little bit long of a read. So podcast listeners and listeners to the live stream right now, buckle up. Maybe you could talk about how important it is for our fans who are legitimately disappointed to act like adults and channel our frustrations in a positive way through loud and consistent support for our student athletes. Ezra Hack, all Ezra, comes from the top rope. Yes. Watching many alum who feed inside JMU football Twitter ridicule Georgia Southern fans after loss in Statesboro was expected. But the embarrassing takes by some JMU fans after Saturday's game was beyond the pale. So was Signetti's presser. Will JMU football coach ever take responsibility, own a loss? And I think Ezra is back to last season days because the way he wove in that Signetti dig from something that's not even remotely related to
that is peak Ezra.
That was amazing. He's back, folks. He's back. We missed him, but he's back.
Just out of nowhere. So was Signetti's presser. While we're on the subject.
I'm glad you brought up Kurt Signetti's presser, Ezra. I didn't. Will it change? All right. Oh so last week for the Sun Belt Weekly Pick'em, we both were on App State, which is a good thing because App State picked up the win, folks. App State destroyed Georgia State 42.
Can I say something from that? I think I think Sean Clark after the game said that they had started to find their identity, which I thought was my favorite thing ever. It's like they just ran the ball against a horrible defense. He's like, we know who we are. It's like, okay, all right, if you say so.
Big time game over there in the Sun Belt West as Troy took down South Alabama in an absolute barn burner. Troy wins 10-6 against the South Alabama Jaguars. That's big for Sun Belt West reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Both teams are now 2-1 in Sunbelt. Well, both teams now have one loss in Sunbelt action. Marshall took down JMU. We all know. God, get out of here. Army took down UL Monroe. We both were on Army. Georgia Southern, they went to ODU, and they took down the Monarchs. Is Georgia Southern for real, folks? They might be, because there's 2-2 in Sunbelt play.
Ventrice is he's a savage on Twitter.
What do you do?
There was something that was like ODU fans were getting all hype about how many sacks they had before, and they're like, "We're about to eat on this offensive line." And he tweeted like after the game, he's just like, "LOL."
Good for him.
Yeah,
Arkansas State lost by 20 to Louisiana. Why were you on Arkansas State?
Those are my boys, man. Butch Jones
right.
has those guys fired up to play.
We both were on Southern Miss, so that leaves us both with a 2-loss week. We're keeping pace with each other right now. Are you ready for this week?
I'm always ready.
All right, so this week, kicking things off on a Thursday, Louisiana takes on Southern Miss. Southern Miss is a 1-point favorite.
Southern Miss, I think, if Troy wasn't as good as Troy was, I think Southern Miss would be the pretty obvious favorite in the West. They're a team that many people say are dogs. They're just filled with dogs. So I like them to win that one.
Specifically Frank Gore Jr. Old Dominion. This is a shocker of a game. Heads down to Georgia State. Georgia State's a 4-point favorite.
Yeah, that line is fascinating to me. It seems a little fishy. I'll take Georgia State because of that.
All right, I'm taking ODU because I don't think Georgia State's that good.
No,
and
they're
ODU,
not.
while they've lost a few games here, they're 3-4, but 2-1 in Sunbelt. They've taken down Coastal. They hung tough with Georgia Southern last week. I think their offense is finding its rhythm, which is unfortunate news for JMU, who plays them in 3 weeks. Robert Morris. Do you remember Robert Morris?
Remember when we were like, "Oh, they're pretty good." They're actually
they play
pretty good.
App State. Who do you have?
They're 0-7 this year. I like App State in this game.
Upset of the century. I'm giving Robert Morris the chance to just keep his App State all day. South Alabama, Arkansas State. South Alabama, 12.5-point favorite. Arkansas State, now widely regarded as one of the worst teams in the nation.
I like South Alabama.
I like South Alabama too. I'm glad you're on the Jaguar hype train. And a fantastic game, if you ask me. Coastal takes on Marshall, 7 p.m. NFL Network on Saturday. Marshall, a 2-point favorite. The total is set at 55.5. Marshall kind of needs this game if they want to stay in pace for the Sun Belt East. And I'll also say, if you're a JMU fan, you might want to be rooting for Marshall in this game, because I think Marshall will probably drop one more throughout this season. And I know I'm thinking way too far ahead. JMU's in the middle of a 2-game losing streak with 3 Sun Belt games left. It's really far out to think that they can win the Sun Belt East. But maybe you want Marshall to win, knock Coastal down to 2 losses, and then you hope Marshall loses another. Who do you got?
Coastal is a gigantic fraud. I like Marshall in this spot. I think it's actually a shame how much of a fraud Coastal is. It's embarrassing. They might not win another game the rest of the way.
That's insane.
They'll beat UVA. They might not win another Sun Belt game the rest of the way.
That's insane, because I'm going Coastal in this game. I know they're a fraud. Look, Marshall's a bigger fraud.
I love that they're like, whatever they are over the last 3 years, they're like 28-3. And we're like, look, we know they're frauds.
I can't wait for them to beat us the last week of the season.
Oh, that would be horrible.
And Coastal fans to dig up our podcast clips, because Coastal fans will and be like, these are the stupid doo-doo heads that called us frauds. Like, it'll be something ridiculous, but
they are frauds, though. So.
All right. Anything else you got to add?
No.
We'll be back next week with a men's basketball, women's basketball preview. Exciting stuff. It's the bye week, so not a lot to break down. We'll do basketball preview and probably a bit of a I guess next week would be a Louisville preview. So basketball instead of review and whatever. However we do it, we'll do it. Basketball coming up next. Maybe a special guest in there. Maybe try and get someone to talk about the Dukes. We'll put our ears to the phones and try and get someone for you all. But we'll see what happens. Anything else you want to add?
No, just looking forward to the opportunity to have every opportunity and every chance. Stay
All
humble, stay
right, the
hungry.
standard is the standard. As Steve Sarkeesian would say, the standard is the standard, but when we reach the standard, we got to make a new standard, folks. This has been the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online and 3 Notched. You'll have a wonderful rest of your night. See ya.